Boris Johnson's Brexit plan will be tested in court today. 11 of the UK's most senior judges will rule on his suspension of Parliament. They'll reconcile differing rulings from lower courts in England and Scotland. Now, at the heart of the debate is whether suspending Parliament is a matter for the judiciary. Well, Bloomberg's Sebastian Salek joins us now live outside the Supreme Court in Westminster. Sebastian, so we know the last 3 days. We don't know exactly when we'll have the ruling. But as soon as we have the ruling, does Parliament sit back if it's against the government?
Well, that's not clear yet. It depends exactly what is in that ruling. And indeed, we saw last time in Scotland, there was no interim order to allow them to do that. So there's a lack of legal certainty at this point, but the magnitude of this cannot be understated. It's more than Brexit. This is about the UK Constitution and the state it's in. It is, some would say, buckling because it's, of course, uncodified. There's no one written source for it, and a lot of it relies on convention, just the goodwill of people adhering to it. We're not seeing that happen at this stage, so there's so much to consider here, and it's going to be in the hands of the 11 judges sat in this building behind me.
Yeah, Sebastian, I mean, this comes after a pretty chaotic trip to Luxembourg for the Prime Minister of the UK. How much do we know about, his strategy from there? Does he continue going around to try and get support for a better plan, or did they actually sit down and try and draft an alternative to the backstop?
Well, the official line is that we're still looking to get a deal. This is what we hear from the spokesperson, but if you saw what happened yesterday, there was no real progress made. We saw Boris Johnson sat down with Jean-Claude Juncker, the head of the EU, and we didn't get anywhere. And we had that embarrassing press conference that never really was with the Luxembourgish Prime Minister. So we hear from some civil service departments that this is more leaning now towards no-deal planning than it is towards getting a deal. But of course, the Prime Minister's interest is to keep that confidence high, to keep the optimism there, and see whether we can come to some sort of agreement. They point to a lack of political will on the European side, but it's not clear whether there is that will on either side, really, although the EU have said in the past, you've heard from many players there, trying to play hardball, trying to say we won't go for a no-deal Brexit. It just doesn't seem in anybody's interest.
Seb Salek, I've got a headline here from the United Kingdom Supreme Court, which dovetails perfectly with my next question. The Supreme Court head says not concerned with political issues. As in the United States, is there a perceived left-right to this United Kingdom Supreme Court? Is there a Labour-Tory split or even a Lib Dem split?
It's less about the politics and more about the separation of powers, whether the politics and the legal side of that can interact and how they do interact. And this is the central issue in this argument. It's where we saw the Scottish and English courts differing. In Scotland, they said the purpose of this was to stymie Parliament. In England, they didn't even get that far. They said this isn't for the courts to decide. So that is the conflict that the 11 judges here have to discuss. And it'll be fascinating to see what they come out with and really how that will shape the future of this country and the future of the way we look at the Constitution.